One of my very favorite trumpets on the modern market is the one I am proud to call my own and get to play whenever I want. The Yamaha YTR-8310Z, designed for jazz legend Bobby Shew. As it happens, Bobby Shew has designed a few flugelhorns during his time with Yamaha, and I happen to like those as well. Let's talk about it. How's it going, everybody? It's your host Sam here from the Samuel Plays Brass channel, as per usual. I hope you're all doing well today, and I appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to stick around because we've got a very cool review coming up. This is once again one of several Yamaha flugelhorns designed in collaboration with Bobby Shew, but perhaps not the one that people are most familiar with. Today's subject is the older 6310Z variant of the one that most people know about today, which is the more recent 8310Z, the one that shares a model number with my trumpet. And there was recently also a Gen 2 revamp of each of the 8310Zs, although I haven't played either the newest trumpet or flugelhorn, unfortunately, but I'm sure they're stellar. Nonetheless, the 6310Z is not quite as well known as its later 83 counterpart, but is similarly a very cool horn. A lot of people who know about it consider it the OG Shew horn, which to an extent I think is true, but if you really look closely at Yamaha's sort of family tree of flugelhorns on the Bobby Shew branch, there is kind of one rare model of Yamaha flugelhorn that sort of sneaks in as a predecessor to the 6310. The history around it is a little bit fuzzy. There are very few examples left, seemingly, out there, and there's not a whole lot of information online about it, but I'm curious to know if anybody knows which model I'm talking about. I've got a review coming up on it very soon. I'm really excited to release it, and it's just an amazing instrument, but leave a comment if you know which model number I'm talking about. And it's interjection time, because I haven't done enough poking and prodding about this recently. I am very thankful to live a full and fulfilling life between working on a degree in mechanical engineering, working part-time, and making content on YouTube for you all. But as you might be able to guess, it can be quite a strain, and it spreads me pretty thin. If you are feeling generous and would like to ease some of that strain on me, as well as supporting bigger and better content on the Samuel Plays Brass channel, please consider checking out patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass. There are a variety of reward tiers there for various amounts of money per month, and it really helps take some of the load off my shoulders as far as content creation goes. So once again, patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass. You can find the link in the description or in the card in the top right corner. And without further ado, we'll get back to the video. Now, before we get too deep into the technical specs of the 6310, I want to give you a few precursors about how it was designed and how it came to be. One of the most famed jazz flugelhorns of all time, highly regarded among jazz cats and classical cats alike, is the one made by the Quinon company in Paris. Quinon flugelhorns are absolutely revered for their soft and smoky and ballad-like jazz tone quality. And so, a lot of jazz artists have used Quinon flugelhorns over the years, but the trouble is, while their sound is so highly regarded, what is not quite so highly regarded is their intonation and consistency between models. A lot of them play really, really out of tune. And so when Bobby Shew sat down with Yamaha to design his first flugelhorn, that was his big ask. He wanted something that sounded, and to some extent felt, like his Quinon, but without those infamously poor intonation tendencies. And that is how the 6310 was born. The basis on which the 6310 was built and how it was different from the existing 631 and 731 models, which I have reviewed, you can find the 631 up in the card, was the small French bore of the Quinon. Yamaha opted for a small French bore of 0.413 inches for Bobby's model, as opposed to the 631's 0.433, which I would consider a medium small. I mean, obviously it's smaller than most trumpet valve blocks that are generally at the lowest 438 and generally around 459, but still, in my opinion, not quite small enough for the ideal flugelhorn experience. Like its cousin, the 631, the 6310 had a 6-inch bell flare, and the bell was made from yellow brass, which was the case for some of the 631s and 731s, but not for the 631G, which had a gold brass flare. You can go to that video up in the card if you want to learn more about bell materials and such. But nonetheless, if you have the same size bell, but a smaller bore at the valve section, what does that mean? That means the tubing has to expand more between the valve section and the bell flare. And that, again, was part of the basis on which the 6310 was built. As far as other features of note go about the 6310Z, it's got a large Morse taper mouthpiece receiver, generally comes supplied with a Yamaha Bobby Shew signature flugel mouthpiece. It's a decent mouthpiece for 3C-ish players looking to fluff up their tone quality a little bit, but in my opinion, I do think there are better options out there. If you want to look at alternatives, there's the Denis Wick FL series, which Yamaha flugelhorns really tend to like. There are other Yamaha flugelhorn models, of course, and there's the Shilky flugelhorn series, which I haven't heard of too many people playing on, but they do have that nice large shank. And there are a decent number of manufacturers like Curry with a variety of shank options, one of which being the Yamaha shank. So it is a fairly ubiquitous option, but be warned, Yamaha lead pipes like to swallow their mouthpieces, so do make sure you have the correct shank taper. Bach flugel pieces, and especially Euro taper flugelhorn pieces, actually taper's redundant there because they don't really taper at the shank, those mouthpieces really do not like Yamaha receivers. As is the case with most well-reputed flugelhorns, the Yamaha 6310Z tunes at the lead pipe. You just untighten the screw, pull the pipe the desired amount, and then tighten the screw again. This lead pipe is one of the few differences between the 6310 and the newest. I think the 8310Z was still the same, but the 8310Z Gen 2 is a little bit different. It has a shorter lead pipe referred to as the Malone pipe, and it's very highly regarded. The difference here is that with the 63 and I think the original 83, you basically just have lead pipe and then valves. With the Gen 2 83, you have the lead pipe, which is a little bit shortened, and then you have a section of tubing that doesn't have a retractable sliding tube within it, and that section is conical, and then you jump into the valve section. That is supposed to improve some things acoustically and from a playability standpoint, but nonetheless I didn't really find any problems necessarily with the 6310 lead pipe, and the reason for that is I think the bore at the valves is small enough that having a lead pipe go straight into the valves is not the worst thing in the world. Speaking of valves, like with any modern Yamaha instrument, the 6310's valves are made from Monel, a mostly nickel compound with a little bit of copper in it, and these valves are, as one would expect from a Yamaha, quick and quiet and exactly what you need them to be. And then coming out of the third slide, we have a third valve trigger, but in my opinion, this is one of the weaker aspects of the 63 and something that they did a better job on with newer flugelhorns. If you do seek to play a 6310 or a 631 or 731 type flugelhorn, I strongly recommend ditching that trigger paddle and instead getting the one that fits on the 8310 or 8315 flugelhorn. There are a variety of retailers that sell that trigger as a spare or replacement part, and I think it's a much better trigger paddle. It's longer and more curved so that you can actually use all three of these fingers instead of just these two here. This is such a crappy trigger experience, so definitely look into that. All of the trigger paddles are compatible in terms of where the screws line up and how you assemble them on Yamaha flugelhorns. It's just a question of the length of the paddle, and I strongly prefer the newer ones for obvious reasons. A big part of my rationale for being a Yamaha guy in most cases is the fact that Yamaha's upper end high brass tend to have a really consistent feel throughout their whole range, and the 6310 flugel is no exception. What I really like about Shew's flugels is that they tend to feel really consistent from the bottom notes all the way up to and even above high C. Considering a lot of flugelhorns don't like to go above the staff at all if they can help it, I think it's really great that Shew's flugels can sit on high A's, high C's, even high D's or beyond if you have that kind of range. Of course, it's not quite as brilliantly easy as it is on his 8310 trumpet, but nonetheless, pretty good by flugelhorn standards. The pedal tones are also there. I know most trumpet players probably don't care about or use those particularly much, but I like testing them out, and hey, they're great on this, as they are on every Yamaha flugel I've tried. Something I think is a real strong suit of the 6310 and the other Shew flugels, and is more evidence of them being really good for jazz soloists, is the fact that their jazz inflection in the form of pitch bends and shakes is really strong. A lot of flugelhorns stuff up when you try and change partials too quickly, and they have really firm slots so they can't really bend notes super well. The Shew does away with all that, and it does really, really well in those areas. And furthermore, there's not too much bending required of you necessarily because the intonation is pretty good. I think Yamaha remedied most, if not all, of what was wrong with the Queenon in this sense. The intonation is surprisingly good between problem octaves. We're talking notes like E or E flat or D or C sharp, where the lower ones tend to be really sharp and the upper ones tend to be flat. The lower ones are not too sharp on this instrument, not terribly so, and the upper ones are not as flat as you might expect. But if there is any one singular reason to play a Shew flugelhorn, it's Bobby's secret formula. That small French bore that he had Yamaha design his flugels with is really something special. The sound it results in is amazing. My desired continuum of flugelhorn sound has two ends. You have sort of the soft and smoky end for jazz ballad type stuff, and you have the really rich and dark and expansive sort of sound of something like brass band hymns or something like that. And while I think all Yamaha flugelhorns sit at a nice point on this end of the continuum, the soft and smoky end I found markedly lacking on the 631, not so on the 6310. The 6310 spans the entire continuum with absolute brilliance. The sound is admittedly brighter and thinner on the Bobby Shew Flugel piece, ironically speaking, but I think it is a good match for big band or studio or pops or commercial type playing. But particularly with that Denis Wick 2FL that's my daily driver flugel mouthpiece, the sound remains really consistent and steadfast across all dynamics, which maybe for trumpet isn't such a good thing, but for flugelhorn is exactly what I look for. The sound doesn't break up or tub out easily as it does on many flugelhorns. Honest to goodness, in terms of the mainstream market, I think Shew's flugelhorns are some of the absolute top contenders for balancing superb ease of playability with a really pleasant tone. In my humble opinion, for whatever my 2 cents are worth, even a lot of really highly regarded flugels only really offer you one or the other at once. And so I think it's really great that Shew's designs can tackle both to such a great extent. And of course, I'm totally not biased whatsoever to any degree at all, but I think Shew's designs are really great, full stop. Now I just need them to release a cornet, and then I can die happy. I did, after testing both, end up having a pretty significant preference for the 6310 over its unfortunately much more common cousin, the 631. The 631 and 731 are not bad flugelhorns by any means. I really enjoyed the 631 when I reviewed it, but that was kind of before I'd gotten to test some more Yamaha flugels and form a little bit better of an opinion there. I really just think it doesn't have quite as nice of a sound. The larger bore at the valve section allows for a little bit more projection if you do a lot of big band work or need to soar over a band for solo work, but I think those extra 20 thousandths of an inch at the valve section, at least when you keep the bell flare the same dimensions, it just doesn't allow for enough conical expansion to really result in the sound that I like. And I think the Shew was much closer to hitting my desired mark. But of course, for any Yamaha Bobby Shew flugelhorn, if your sound concept like mine is on the really extremely dark end of things, I would probably suggest discarding the Bobby Shew mouthpiece unless you naturally play darker on its shallower cup. I really do a lot better with this flugel on something like my Denis Wick 2FL. And that'll just about do it. I hope you enjoyed another Samuel Plays Brass review. Stay tuned for more coming very soon, but if you want to check out more in the meantime, you can check out the Instrument Reviews playlist in the top right corner in the card. Make sure before you go to leave a like and a comment on this video if you enjoyed, and until next time, I'll see you on the flip side. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to support the creation of bigger and better content on the Samuel Plays Brass channel, have your name featured right here, and a whole host of other perks and benefits, then please consider pledging your support at patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass. For now, you can find more videos in the end screen cards to my left.